Example 1, finding critical values for the F distribution for part A. We want to be able to find the critical F value. For a right tail test with alpha equals 0.05, the degrees of freedom in the numerator is equal to 10, and the degrees of freedom in the denominator is equal to 7. Now, the approach is we're going to perform the following steps to obtain the critical values. So for step 1, we want to be able to draw an F distribution with critical values in area labeled. So if we take a look at figure 16, it's going to show the F distribution with 10 degrees of freedom in the numerator and 7 degrees of freedom in the denominator. And the area to the right of the unknown critical value is 0.05. So we denote this critical value where we have F, this is alpha 0.05. So let me go ahead and highlight that. So we can see that the area is 0.05, which is the alpha here. So it's the area to the right. And then we have the degrees of freedom in the numerator. So 10 degrees of freedom in the numerator gives you the value of 10. So there's your value of 10. And then we have 7 degrees of freedom in the denominator. So therefore we have 7. And we're going to use that information on the table to find out what our critical value is going to be. So using table 9 to find the critical value is what we do in step 2. So let's take a look at figure 17 here. It shows a partial representation of table 9. We box the column corresponding to 10 degrees of freedom in the numerator. So recall that 10 degrees of freedom in the numerator is 10. So there is our value of 10 degrees of freedom in the numerator. And then we also have 7, which is the row that corresponds to the 7 degrees of freedom in the denominator. So there is 7. And then we need to look at the area of alpha, which is 0.05. So here is 0.05. And we can see that we have 10 and then 7. And so therefore, that's going to give us a critical value of 3.64. So that means that the critical value right here, so in this particular problem, then we would say that the critical value here is 3.64. Now, in studying this table 9, notice that some values of the degrees of freedom for either the numerator or denominator are not in the table. If the number of degrees of freedom is not found in the table, follow the practice of choosing the degrees of freedom closest to that desired. If the degrees of freedom is exactly between two values, find the mean of the values. For example, to find the critical value corresponding to 35 degrees of freedom in the numerator, compute the mean of the critical values corresponding to 30 and 40 degrees of freedom in the numerator.